So this is a Unit 3 test remediation. This is only one part of the retest process. Make sure you ask your tutorial teacher if you have to come back for the second part. They can tell you based on your original test score. If you have to come back for a second one and you only come for this first one, you are going to forfeit part of your points back. So make sure you do come back for the second portion. So the first thing we're going to talk about are some basic angle relationships that we covered in Unit 3. So one of the first things we talked about were what different angles are, and this one right here has this really important square down there. You need to remember that square automatically means 90, but what we did here was we talked about angle relationship, and that is when you have two or more angles. So by drawing that middle line, I have angle A and angle B. Now together, if I was to add them back, they are both 90 degrees together. So we called this complementary. So this was one of the first angle relationships that we covered. Now for your retest, what we will do is we'll give you a number example. So something like this. We're going to tell you that this top angle is 30 and we want you to find this missing angle. Since I know that together they both equal 90, that question mark, all I'm going to do to find it is take 90 minus whatever angle we give you. And since we gave you 30, we're going to subtract 30 from it. So I know the question mark is 90 minus 30. I know that it's just 60 degrees. Now the second one we talked about, the two angles together or three angles, whatever they are, they form a straight line together. And the relationship for this is supplementary. So together they make a straight line. They equal 180 degrees. So again, we're going to ask you to find a missing angle. So I have the question mark there, and maybe I'm telling you that the other side is 100 degrees. Now I just told you that they make a straight line together, they're supplementary, so they equal 180. So instead of subtracting from 90, we're going to subtract whatever angle is given from 180. So I have 180 because it's supplementary, and I'm subtracting that given angle of 100. So I find out that question mark is just 80 degrees. Now the last type of angles we had are when two lines intersect. So I have two lines here. I have these two angles A and B, and we called these vertical angles. What you need to know about vertical angles is that these are congruent. And all congruent is another word for equal. So I have these two lines that intersect. I have this angle that I don't know that I want you to find. And I know that the angle across from it is 61. Vertical angles are exactly across from each other, either top and bottom or left and right. So because they are congruent, I know that the question mark is just equal to 61 as well. All right, so the next thing we covered was transversals. What a transversal was we had two parallel lines. Remember, these lines are never going to intersect, but they are cut by another line that does intersect them. This line right here that I just drew, that's actually the transversal. As you can see, when that line does intersect the two parallel lines, there are 8 angles that are formed. These are special because they have different names and different relationships, and that's what we're going to cover on the right side. Before we go through and figure out what the different types are and give some examples, we kind of need to cover some vocab. There are two different words that you may see. The first is interior and exterior. If we're talking about interior and exterior, we're talking about between these two parallel lines. So between the two parallel lines, this would be interior. If they're outside the parallel lines, that would be exterior. And then alternate refers to this transversal. Alternate means they're on different sides of this, or same side means they're on the same side of that transversal. So for alternate interior, I'm looking for angles that are inside the parallel lines, but on different sides of the transversal. For these ones, they won't be touching until we get to linear pair. So an example that I could use would be 3 and 6. There's also another pair other than 3 and 6, and it is angle 4 and angle 5. The next special angle we have is alternate exterior. So opposite sides of that transversal still, but outside of the parallel lines. So what that looks like is like angle 1 and angle 8. There's also another pair besides 1 and 8, and it's very similar, but it is angle 2 and angle 7. We're going to skip down and do same side interior. So now we're looking at inside the parallel lines, but on the same side of this transversal. So one example you have is angle 3 and angle 5. And another pair that follows that same rule is angle 4 and angle 6. We also have same side exterior, so on the same side of this transversal but outside of the parallel lines. So those examples are angle 1 and angle 7 and angle 2 with angle 8. I'm now going to talk about vertical, and there are quite a few in here. We're just going to list some of them. Remember, your vertical angles are in this X and they're across from each other. So like 1 and 4. So I just told you angle 1 and angle 4 are a pair. You have angle 2 and angle 3, angle 5 and angle 8, and the last one is angle 6 and angle 7. Your corresponding angles that you have are in the same position on these little 4s, but on the bottom. So like 1 is in the top left, so its corresponding is 5. That's on the top left down there. So I'm going to go ahead and list out the corresponding angle pairs. The last one we have is linear pair. We're only going to do about 2 or 3 of these. Linear pair are just two angles that are touching on this transversal. So they can either be touching left and right or on top of each other. So some examples of those include angle 1 and angle 2, angle 1 and angle 3, or like angle 2 and angle 4. There are a few others as well though. The next topic we're going to cover is finding slope. I'm going to give you some steps. You're going to copy those down, and then we're going to do 2 examples together. So you're going to have 4 steps with slope. First, you're going to write the points on top of each other if they're not already. You're then going to find the change in y and the change in x, so how you go from the top number to the bottom number. You're going to write that as a fraction, putting the change in y on the top and the change in x on the bottom. And finally, you're going to reduce that fraction. You're going to use the button above the 7 on your calculator to reduce. So the first example we're going to do is we're finding the slope between 1, 2 and 3, 4. So step 1, write points on top of each other. This is already done. Step 2, we're going to find the change in y and the change in x. What that means is I need to see how I go from 2 to 4, I add 2, and how I go from 1 to 3, I also add 2. Now I'm going to write my slope as change in y over change in x. Those are those numbers we just found. My change in y is positive 2 over my change in x is also positive 2. I now need to reduce this 2 divided by 2, or you can plug it into your calculator, and I find out that my slope is just 1. You're in charge of doing the second example on your paper. We will be checking this to give you credit. So you're finding the slope between 0, 1 and negative 1, 4. The last thing we're going to cover for this session is parallel and perpendicular slope. You need to know that parallel slopes are the exact same. So like if it's 2, the parallel slope is 2. If it's negative 1/3, the parallel slope is negative 1/3. Same sign, same number. But for perpendicular slopes, we have what we call opposite reciprocals. We're going to break this down, both of these words, to see what that means. The word opposite means that you're going to change the sign. So if it's positive, it will go negative. If it is negative, it will go positive. A reciprocal means we're going to flip the number. So if we have 1 over 4, it's going to flip to 4 over 1 or just 4. And if you have something like 8, a whole number, you first need to put it over 1 and then you flip it. That's just the reciprocal part. So the first example we're going to do together, I'm telling you here that your slope is negative 2. I want you to tell me the parallel slope and the perpendicular slope. So remember, for parallel slope, it stays the exact same. So my parallel slope here is negative 2. Now my perpendicular slope, we're first going to change the sign. So we're changing it from negative 2 to positive 2, and I need to flip it. So I need to put negative 2 over 1, and it's now going to be a 1/2. So my perpendicular slope would be positive 1/2. Example 2, again, is for you to do on your own. I'm giving you the slope of 5 over 7, and I want you to tell me what the parallel slope and the perpendicular slope is. Remember, you have to do this question if you want credit for this session.